the afternoon in New Zealand on Wednesday. I think I've got that now, and it's Facebook Live. And this is my favorite event of the month. A month where I get to do a Q&A with Michelle Ross. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Dr. Tom. Nice to see you.
Thank you. You too. You too. So let's rock and roll with the first question.
Okay. Hi, Charlene and Deborah and Mary. And Mary has a great question to start us off with. I heard that genetic testing is the best way to see if you are gluten sensitive. What do you think? I know you have the Zoomer test. What's the difference?
Really good question. And genetics, if you pull at a chain, the chain breaks at the weakest link, always. It's going to be at one end, the middle, the other end. It's your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys, wherever your genetic weak link is. If you carry the gene, the BRCA gene, BRCA1 or BRCA2, the breast cancer gene, it doesn't mean you're getting breast cancer. It means that if you pull on the chain too hard, that's likely where it's going to break, or you have a higher risk of it breaking there. Same is true with the Alzheimer's gene, same is true with diabetes genes, same is true with celiac genes. 1/3 of the population carries the celiac gene, but only 1% of people develop celiac disease. So 1/3 means about 33%, 30 to 35%, depending on the study you read, of people of European descent carry the gene for celiac. But only 1% get the disease. So if you have the gene, it doesn't mean you're getting the disease, but it means if you pull at the chain too hard, that's likely where it's going to break. That's the weak link in your chain. And the pull, of course, is inflammation and anything that causes inflammation. So genetics are of value to see where your weak links are, but they are not a first-tier test. A first-tier test when talking about wheat is my immune system fighting wheat right now? Because your immune system is the armed forces in your body. It's the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard. We call them IgA, IgG, IgE, IgM. They're just branches of the armed forces. And if they get called out to fight something, if you've got elevated levels of antibodies to dairy, your immune system is saying, you got a problem with dairy, whether you get sick or not. And if you have the logic, well, I feel fine when I eat wheat, I don't care if I have elevated antibodies to wheat, then just wait. It'll hit you. It'll hit you. The time frame is usually 7 years from the time you first identify the antibodies to where a person will have celiac disease, where all the microvilli are all worn down. They've got no villi left. They've got malabsorption. They've got brain problems. They've got osteoporosis. The list goes on because it's been developing for years. So the concept that genes are a first-tier test is just not accurate. It's a useful test. And but the first tier is, are my armed forces called out right now to protect me? Michelle, do you want to add to that one?
Yes, I have double gene celiac, DQ2, DQ8. That's never going to change. I had one test. I do wheat Zoomer on myself every year because I want to make sure that my gluten-free lifestyle is working. I use it as a report card. So those genetics, just because I know that I have the genes that predispose me to celiac disease, and I know that at one point in my life, those genes were turned on and then I've turned them off, doesn't let me know that I'm not being exposed to gluten, right? Gluten's permeated our society, right? And even though I'm squeaky clean and as careful as I can possibly be, and I take the enzymes when I eat out and I read labels like a label reading detective, I still want to make sure that my intestinal permeability is healed and that I'm not getting exposed to gluten or wheat. And so that's the difference. One of them lets you know if you carry the genes. The other one lets you know if gluten is damaging your body.
That's really good. Thanks for saying that. And I'm just reminded that today I came across an article today that was talking about hidden gluten in pediatric vitamins, where the capsule, the manufacturer used some byproduct of wheat to make the gelatin in the capsule, or some of the fillers that they use. And they don't list that the capsule has wheat in it. And it was startling to see the percentages of pediatric vitamins that have wheat in them, and they're not labeled on the bottle. So you have to be really careful, and you learn more as you continue to study in this field.
Right. And there's 70 plus genes associated with gluten sensitivity. So there could be somebody that just needs to be really careful with avoiding gluten. Like they need to not eat bread and the main gluten. There's people like me that can't have gluten in their shampoo and conditioner and skincare. They have to go to that level. Like I need to make sure that I'm not drinking wine out of like barrels that have the glue that contains gluten. Like I have to be really, really careful because I'm that sensitive, but it's worth it to me because I regain my health. And that's way more important than, being like the bother of, avoiding gluten. That's like my health is so valuable. So Wheat Zoomer helps me to do that. And I'm really, really grateful. And it's so exciting to get a clean Wheat Zoomer, or maybe there's one little yellow and it just reminds me that I never get to put my feet up and say, I've got this. I always get to be vigilant.
Right, it's really true. And the Wheat Zoomer is boots on the ground. Is this working or not? Mm-hmm. Is my immune system on high alert right now? That is the go-to test. That's the primary and first test that people should do when they're concerned about wheat. And it even comes in a finger prick version now. You just poke your finger and put a drop of blood on a card. You don't even need to have the blood draw. And it's just as accurate. So, and Michelle, what came up for me that some people may be thinking, well, I was tested. I don't have celiac disease, so it's okay for me to eat wheat. What
about those other 70 genes? What about the gluten sensitivity or the wheat sensitivity? I've seen people with no gluten sensitivity, but wheat sensitivity is off the chart, and there's wheat in toothpaste. There's wheat in all of the
thyroid medications.
Right? Mm-hmm. A lot of medications have wheat as a thickener.
Right. So this thing about celiac disease, and so many doctors are focused on celiac disease when you ask them about gluten or about wheat. It's a historical misconception. I love saying that term. That comes from Professor Hajivasulu in Sheffield, England. He's a world famous neurologist, and he refers to concepts like this as a historical misconception, that's what they believed 20, 30 years ago, is that if you don't have celiac disease, you're okay with wheat. But now we know that for every one person with celiac disease, the study came out of Italy, where they have 38 centers designated by the government as gluten-related disorder centers. And family doctors and pediatricians, if they think their patient has a problem with wheat, they send them to one of these 38 specialty clinics around the country. Because if you get a diagnosis from this clinic that you have a problem with wheat, your food's a tax deduction. So they see thousands and thousands in these 38 centers of patients every year they suspect have a problem with wheat, or their family doctor suspected they have a problem with wheat. And they publish a paper that 7% of the people sent to them have celiac disease, 7%. Now, these are doctors that think, and the patients think, I may have a problem with wheat. So they go to the specialty clinic, 7% of them have celiac. 93% have wheat-related disorders, meaning their migraines are coming from wheat, but they don't have celiac, or their joint pains or their skin problems are coming from wheat, but they don't have celiac. So the ratio, it's 93 to 7. Out of 100 people, 7 have celiac, 93 have a wheat-related disorder. So whether or not you have celiac disease has very little to do with whether you have to identify, do I have a problem with wheat? So you can't use the diagnosis of celiac, if that comes back negative, to say, I don't have a problem with wheat. It's okay for me to eat my pizza because I don't have celiac disease. That is a historic misconception.
And if you do the finger prick test, make sure that you also test total immunoglobulins through LabCorp Quest. Ask your doctor to run that, because your ability to make antibodies could be low, and then you could think you don't have a problem. You could get a false negative, and I don't want that to happen. So that's the one thing, is you can't add on total immunoglobulins. If you order the blood test, it's a free add-on, and that will come as an add-on. And if you have me do the interp, or if you have your practitioner do the interp, they can let you know if you're in a healthy reference range for all of your immunoglobulin production or antibody production, and then we can trust the accuracy of the test. Otherwise, we have to take that into consideration when we interpret your test.
So I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit more. That your immune system has a bank account, and every time it gets called upon to protect you from something, you withdraw a little from the bank account. No problem, because it's always rebuilding itself and making more deposits into the bank account, the energy reserve for your immune system. But if your immune system is tired, if it's worn out, when you were a kid, you had multiple ear infections or sinus infections and lots of antibiotics, and your gut's a problem, 70% of the immune system's in your gut. And over the years, your gut problems continued and continued, your bank account may be dry. And if your bank account is dry, then this blood test is not accurate. And that's what Michelle means by making sure you test total immunoglobulins. So on a blood draw, it's an add-on. And Michelle, are you saying it's not an add-on for the finger prick? Is that correct?
No, they're not able to do total immunoglobulins with just the finger prick.
Okay, so that means that people that have a history of recurrent antibiotic use once or twice a year, every other year for sinus or throat, strep infections or ear infections, don't do the finger prick, because your risk of being overdrawn in your bank account is high. And if that's the case, the blood test won't be accurate. The finger prick will not be accurate. So do the blood test. If you have a history of a very active immune system that's needed help, like antibiotics or steroids for asthma and things like that, then do the blood test. Don't do the finger prick.
I have a sample of that pulled up here. So here's one of the arm forcers, total IgG. It's one of the main antibodies tested on wheat tumor. This person is not making enough IgG antibodies. Right. Now, the beautiful thing about wheat tumor is you can still do that test, and somebody who's knowledgeable about interpretation can interpret that test and help you to understand if you're high normal. We have to, we can interpret it and help you to understand that there's likely a gluten sensitivity. If you have markers that are out of range, whoa, yes, your immune system's on fire for gluten or wheat, right? Because it's barely even making IgG antibodies.
You're taking loans out from the bank to put into your bank account, and then you're withdrawing from the bank account, but you're taking out more loans in order to do that. So if you have low total immunoglobulins and still the test comes back positive, your body is working really, really hard, and it puts you at risk for other immune problems down the road.
Absolutely. Okay. We spent a long time on that one, but I think it's really important. And this next question from Margaret kind of ties into that. Margaret went 20 years undiagnosed with celiac disease. She's taken pre and probiotics. She has intestinal area bloating that never left, and she wants to know if there's any solutions. Ah,
We've got a little guest here reaching out. There's Michelle. Say hi, Michelle.
Theo. Hi, sweet boy. How you doing? Do I get a smile today? I got a smile. Hi, cutie. Hi, cutie pie. Peekaboo.
So for everyone out there, please excuse us, but this is Facebook Live, and my son gets to come on and say hello to everybody before he goes to bed.
Hi, Gio. Hi.
Okay. Night, night. Oh, no. Yeah. Okay.
Night, night. Hi, Marcy.
Hi, honey. Hi, Daddy.
Bye-bye. Yeah, bye-bye. He's waving. That's so great.
So
That's
cute.
so great. It is. Okay. Sorry, what was the question?
So Margaret had undiagnosed celiac disease for 20 years, and we hear this story on repeat, right? Because here in the US, it just happens so often. So she's taken pre and probiotics, and that's great, but the intestinal bloating never left. So any solutions?
Oh my gosh. You know, two days ago, in one of our programs we're doing right now called Heal Community, I was to have a session with everyone, and my internet died, so I couldn't. So I've been calling people to check in and make sure, get their questions answered. And I talked to this couple 2 days ago that just blew me away. She had rheumatoid arthritis and 17 years of chemotherapy, 25 years of prednisone, and 25 different medications that she was taking every week. I mean, I just can't even imagine any doctor but probably, the cardiologist is giving her some stuff and the internist is giving her other stuff and the rheumatologist is, and there's no one overseeing it all. She then got a hold of one of our books, read the book, and decided to go gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, just to give it a shot. And her husband, the nice fella, came on. I'm a really skeptical guy, Doc, but I thought, we read your book and it kind of made sense to us. And so I said I'd do it with my wife. And in 4 months, she was off all her medications, everything in 4 months. And she went back to the rheumatologist, who laughed at her because she said she felt great, no pain at all now, and she lost a little bit of weight from this. And the rheumatologist laughed at her and said, "You'll be back." And she said, "I never went back to that doctor. And it's been 4 years I've been following you, Dr. O'Brien, 4 years now." And she's completely symptom-free from the rheumatoid arthritis. So to your question, there's something you're missing. The bloating means there's something, and gastroenterologists don't think like this, but it's what's on the end of your fork that affects the tube that starts at the mouth and goes to the other end. It's one big long tube. And what you put into that tube has a dramatic effect on how the tube functions. And that environment in the tube, we call it the microbiome. The environment in there of the good guys and the bad guys and the balance or imbalance of that is what determines how the gut functions. So I would just about wager that you've got this geeky thing called dysbiosis. It means too many bad guys, not enough good guys. You have to rebuild your microbiome, and you need to learn about this. And you don't learn about this overnight. It's going to take a while. And I strongly suspect someone like this who's working hard and just comes up against a roadblock, work with Michelle. I mean, just michelleross.com. Just go to Michelle's site and have a session with her and see if it doesn't make sense to you to take a look at this and take a look at this and take a look at this. And because there's a checklist, and there's some things that are much more common with these symptoms than in others, but there's always the unusual one where all of the common thing, no, it's not that, no, it's not that, no, it's not that. Well, you know, there are a few people that maybe it's arsenic poisoning, so let's check heavy metals. Boom! Heavy metal toxicity comes up, you know? But there's a common scenario of likely triggers for the set of symptoms that you have. And you just need someone to work with you who will save you so much time and money so that you're not, most of us, we read something and we try this. And then we hear some expert and then we try this. And then we hear somebody else and we try this. And, you know, it's like the video of the dog that's chasing its tail, you know, just keep going in circles. And, you know, and because you want to be well and you want to feel good. But unfortunately, most of our doctors have no clue about this. Can you imagine this woman, 17 years of chemotherapy? And these people, they believe they're doing the best they can to help the patient because they think like this. And this is all they can do is think like this. They're like racehorses on the track. You know, they've got these blinders on so they can't see to the side and they're just running straight ahead, right? That's unfortunate, but that's the status of so much of our healthcare system today.
That was the training.
Yes,
That was the
exactly
med school
right.
training.
Exactly
The
right.
symptom, this drug, the symptom, this drug. But there is a solution, Margaret, and I find so often those of us that had undiagnosed celiac disease for a long time, there's a lot of damage to the gut, and a comprehensive stool analysis, like a gut tumor, can give a lot of insight. So we're not chasing our tail, or we're not in a pitch black room trying to throw darts at a dartboard that we don't know which wall it's on. So yeah, got to get to the root cause of what's causing your bloating. Mary asked, does genetic testing for lots of food allergies, even though you wouldn't necessarily feel like you're having issues? So does genetic testing test for lots of food allergies?
Yes, there are some tests out that will look at multiple foods to see if you're sensitive to them. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you don't have any symptoms that you can directly associate with what you're eating. And so your suspicion is that what you're eating is fine. If you're wanting to identify if what you're eating is a problem or not, genetics is not the test to do it. As the first question, you know, asked about genetics, and we talked about the wheat zoomer. These zoomer tests, there's a corn zoomer, dairy zoomer, soy zoomer, lectin zoomer. There's a number of different zoomers. They are highly accurate. If you have a normal immune system and it's not worn out, if your bank account's not empty, then these tests are highly, highly accurate. And if you want to know if foods are a problem for you, this is the test. And it has, in geek terms, 97 to 99% sensitivity, 98 to 100% specificity. All that means is it's right on the money every time, as long as you have an immune system that's working properly. It's right on the money every time.
Yeah, I think genetics, you could test to see if you're lactose intolerant, but for the most part, you could do IgE testing for true food allergy. It's a blood test, or IgA, IgG but the zoomers really, those are where I find the biggest value, Dr. Tom, because these 96 food sensitivity tests, and somebody comes back and they're sensitive to lemon and zucchini and all these foods, those are collateral damage.
Yeah.
From the gluten and the corn and the soy and the dairy, these
the big ones, the big boys, right?
So rule those out first, heal the gut, because sometimes I've seen people, they're sensitive to 60 of the 96 foods. Now, if we switch them to the 36 foods they're not sensitive to, how soon before they're sensitive to those, right? They have this crazy intestinal permeability. We've got to take out the big bad foods, the big bad foods for them, heal the gut, right? Nobody's come back to me and said, Michelle, when I eliminated the zucchini, all my symptoms went away. My health totally restored.
Marzi and I had a conversation recently. I said, honey, I really don't like zucchini. And she just looked at me because for years, she makes it because she loves zucchini. I just didn't say anything. Right. So, and yeah, that's really funny, though. I've never seen zucchini change somebody's chronic fatigue. You're right. You're right.
Okay, Wanda says, can vitamin B3 help with ovarian cancer?
That's a very dangerous question because it means the logic is if I take enough vitamin B3, my ovarian cancer will go away. And I have never, ever, there were some things in the past that talked about that, and it's not a common school of thought right now. The B vitamins in general are really important for all of us, really important, but it's the rare exception. I'm not an oncologist, but my impressions are it's the rare exception where something like that is going to make a dramatic difference. Michelle, do you want to add to that?
I completely agree. And, I've seen on a neutral valve where, people are all over the chart with these nutrient deficiencies or excess. Now it's a water soluble vitamin. So the risk of toxicity is fairly low, but too much water and we drowned, right? There's too much of anything can be a problem. So there's testing to do to see if maybe B3 could help, but that wouldn't be the number one thing that I would recommend if somebody had cancer.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. Niacin is great. I use niacin. I've used it a lot in the past myself. That's B3, and I've used it in the past myself a lot, and it's been helpful. It's great with cardiovascular conditions. There's a lot of benefits to making sure you have adequate amounts of vitamin B3, but I've not seen anything that would warrant that kind of a approach to something like ovarian cancer.
You also have to be careful because you can have a niacin flush that is no fun. So if you're doing therapeutic niacin, you need to titrate up.
Well, I target the flush. I'm one of those crazy ones. When I'm in an infrared sauna, I'll take niacin before I go in to help me flush because it's going to open up my blood vessels. That's what the flush is. And then I'm going to perspire more and get toxins out that are deeper in the system. But it's not comfortable. It certainly is not comfortable. It itches a lot. And you want to scratch because you're just itching all over. You drink a bunch of water and it goes away. I don't know.
Right, but if someone's pretty toxic, they can have some pretty significant symptoms. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay. Anonymous asks, can colostrum help with Gerd? And is it best to take it with or without food?
Colostrum, it doesn't matter with or without food. If you think of Mother Nature's way of healing a leaky gut, it's colostrum. It's breast milk. The first 3 to 5 days of mother's breast milk is not milk, it's colostrum. So it is the food. And Gio is still breastfeeding and he'll eat. And then an hour later, he just wants a little from mom. And but I've never seen an issue with colostrum taken with food or without. I don't know that it matters. There may be a reason, I just don't know. And talking to Dr. Andrew Keach, who's the world expert on this, he never referenced about with or without food. His comment doesn't matter. And what was the first part of that question?
Can it help with Gerd?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Gerd is a heartburn-like condition, which means the environment of the digestive tract from the mouth going down to the stomach is inflamed. And where's the inflammation coming from? And a very common source of the inflammation is bacterial infections in the tube, in your digestive tract, in your stomach. Very common is a Heliobacter infection. Just Google Gerd and Heliobacter infection. If that's the first thing that I would check if a patient comes in with Gerd. So you would want to make sure that you've checked for a Heliobacter infection. But I don't think Gerd is a lack of colostrum. I don't think it's a lack of colostrum that causes Gerd. So it may help. It can turn on the genes of anti-inflammation, but there's something else. It's not a colostrum deficiency that's causing the Gerd.
Right. Okay, Susan asked, should all autoimmune go gluten-free?
Yes, without hesitancy. Yes. Every human activates the sentry standing guard. There's a sentry just standing guard, doing nothing, just standing around inside the first part of your small intestine. So any food that comes out of the stomach into the small intestine, if there's any bugs on that food, the sentry, called toll-like receptor 4, fires its chemical bullets, activating inflammation to kill the bug. It then also sends a message to create leaky gut, because leaky gut brings water into the intestines to wash the bug out with the poop. So the sentry standing guard there does that, and it's there our whole lives. It's called toll-like receptor 4, and they're throughout the body, but the ones in the first part of the small intestine are specifically watching everything that comes from the stomach into the intestines, because nothing gets into the body until it comes into the intestines. When you swallow it, it's really not in the body yet, it's in the tube. And the bite of prime rib or hamburger, it has to be digested and chopped up into really tiny, tiny pieces to go through the walls of the tube to get into the bloodstream. So it's really not in your body yet, it's in the tube, right? And the sentry standing guard there is activated anytime wheat comes out of the stomach. And this is from Harvard. This is Professor Maureen Leonard at Harvard. She, in 2017, in the Journal of the American Medical Association, she published a paper where she looked at, I think it was 64 studies on this topic. And she said unequivocally, toll-like receptor 4 gets activated whenever wheat comes out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine. This occurs in all humans who consume wheat. Bold letters, Journal of the American Medical Association. So anytime we eat wheat, we activate intestinal permeability and we activate an entire inflammatory cascade in our gut. So if you have an autoimmune disease, by definition, you've got intestinal permeability already. You eat wheat, you're making it worse. You can't heal if you continue eating foods that cause more inflammation and more opening of the cells in your gut, creating more leaky gut. You can't heal. And we have something called the Autoimmune Diet. Actually, my book, The Autoimmune Fix, is all about this concept and what foods are safe, all the recipes that you can use. And it's a great book. It won a National Book Award. I'm really proud of that because it's all about autoimmune diseases and what foods are safe and which ones are not. And we'll put a link in here for the book. Michelle, do you want to add to that?
And it's arguably the leading cause of getting sick and dying right now. It's
That's
way
right.
more than the number of people with cancer or cardiovascular disease. And that's just based on 7 autoimmune diseases. So, and let's just have a mindset shift, all of us right now. We should be eating whole, real food. nobody, none of us want to sit down to a bowl of cooked wheat berries. It's disgusting. It's chewy. It has no flavor. What people miss is all the garbage we shouldn't be eating anyway. So it's really a gift to get all that out of our diet.
Right. That's a great way of saying it. That's really a great way. And it's a transition for some people. I mean, it took me 7 years to give up my mother's Christmas cookies. I mean, every year I'd go back, well, I can have one. And then it was like flushed down the rabbit hole again, and then we go back home after the holidays and I'd feel bad for a couple of weeks. But patience and kindness with yourself as you're transitioning is the order of the day.
That's because some of us have those gluteomorphin protein where that gluten parks on our opioid receptor sites and makes us think we're getting a hit of morphine or heroin. It's like a drug to our brain. And that's on the wheat sumer. And it's so helpful. It was so helpful for me. I wouldn't have rationalized having heroin once a year on my birthday. I can't rationalize having birthday cake once a year on my birthday. It's a lot easier for me because I value my brain so much, right? So when you see those markers on that test, it's so much easier to get it out of your diet.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah. Some of us are just data people. I think everyone, you need that in black and white in front of you to really be able to make that shift. Okay, this one's from Instagram. Can I take colostrum if my dermatologist advises me to avoid dairy due to adult acne?
Well, two things to that. Avoiding dairy is a great idea. And when people have a sensitivity to dairy, some people don't have a sensitivity to dairy. Still a good idea not to eat it because it's meant for a cow. We've just grown up on it, so we think it's fine. But I would suggest first do the dairy zoomer. See if your immune system is fighting dairy. So that's a huge question. But when people have gut problems, when they have intestinal permeability, I often will say to them, Mrs. Patient, we just found out you're sensitive to dairy. Okay, get it all out of there, all of it. But I'm going to recommend, and this is a clinical decision, so it's a judgment call. But I'm going to recommend you try some colostrum for a couple of months. Get one of those big tubs of colostrum and have a scoop a day because nothing turns on more genes to heal the gut than colostrum does. Nothing. So maybe some of the antibodies to dairy are going to stick around for another couple of months if you're using the colostrum. So as long as you don't have any symptoms from taking the colostrum, no bloating, no gas, no gut pains or anything like that, as long as you feel fine for a couple of months, let's see if you can take it because nothing is going to heal your gut as quickly as this will. And so it's a judgment call. In general, your doctor is absolutely right with autoimmune diseases. You want to stay away from dairy. That's very true. So the question is, what's the status of my gut right now? And that would be identified by two different tests. One is the wheat zoomer because it includes the markers for leaky gut, intestinal permeability, right in that test. And the other is the gut zoomer, looking at the environment of the gut. So you can get a clear overview of your gut by those two tests. And then the use of colostrum is a judgment call. Michelle, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, if I had acne, I would probably go to the theDr.com website and take this. It is a dairy-free colostrum.
Yeah.
And it's Mega IgG 2000. So this company bought the raw material from this medication. It's a serum-derived bovine. And this has a bunch of added junk in it. This is just the raw material. It's immunoglobulins, and it's not going to activate the acne. So there just might be that risk of the little bit of dairy Otherwise, I completely agree with Dr. Tom that, even if you're turning on some of those genes, taking it for 2 months, but if I have somebody that has a dairy zoomer that's lit up like a Christmas tree, as we say, I often use this product, and it's, we can put the link, I can put it in the chat for the team to share with everybody.
Great.
Okay, let's get back here to the questions. Next question is from Australia. Awesome. My son is 7. We didn't know he was allergic to wheat until he was 6, so it caused a lot of problems. We were doing a gut healing diet. His blood work came back saying he has an allergic disease. How do we fix bed bugs, dust mite allergies? We haven't slept a night in 7 years. We take prebiotics. He doesn't sneeze. He gets a blocked nose as soon as he falls asleep.
If he gets a blocked nose as soon as he falls asleep, that's congestion. That's congestion. And for bed bugs or dust mites, you know or can learn how to clean those out of your house. So the foods is an issue. Are there foods that are causing more congestion for him? When you have celiac disease, there are usually a number of other foods that can trigger the same type of immune response as if you're still eating wheat. Michelle, do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so is he dairy free? The first thing I would want to make sure is that he's not having any dairy, because dairy is a cross-reactive food. So if he's consuming dairy, it can perk on that wheat receptor site or gluten receptor site and trick the body into thinking that it's still getting exposed to wheat or gluten, and that can prevent or slow down healing. Corn is another cross-reactive food that can be really problematic.
Let me say that what she means by cross-reactivity is that you're squeaky clean, you're not eating any wheat whatsoever, but then you do a test and it says you got a problem with wheat. So the immune system is still fighting wheat, but I'm not eating any wheat. Cross-reactive means there's other foods that can fool your body into thinking you're still eating wheat. And that's why you have to test dairy and corn. Those are very common.
Yes. So on the corn zoomer, there's a corn wheat overlap epitope, which lets you know that the body thinks it's still getting exposed to wheat. And the research says that if you have a wheat or gluten sensitivity, you should avoid dairy for a minimum of 6 months. Helps to expedite healing. But really, I just see such a common issue with dairy. It's homogenized, it's pasteurized. If we all grew up next to an Amish farm where we ate raw dairy from the time we were first introduced, we probably wouldn't have the epic problem that we have now. But really, it's such a highly inflammatory food. It's such a problematic food that it's probably be the first thing that I could think of to rule out. Sugar would be another. And then, I just wonder, is there mark-ons or sinus infections? I just would love it if he could work with a functional medicine practitioner to really figure out what the root cause is, because there's something wrong. There's something that you guys haven't figured out yet that's preventing all of you from sleeping. Yeah. Congrats on figuring out the wheat and for doing all that you have, but there's still something that's the emergency brake on him fully recovering. Okay, next question is from Instagram. How long does it take to heal intestinal permeability, and what foods to avoid?
You have to understand the development of intestinal permeability, 98% of the time comes from lifestyle. So the way you've been living your life, the foods you choose, the amount of stress you have, the air that you're breathing, the way that you live your life has created the environment that you've got of intestinal permeability. So what foods or what supplements can I take to heal intestinal permeability is never going to cut it. ever. You know, when I came out in practice in 1980, we used to give the probiotics for leaky gut, and we do it for a few months and people felt better. You know, but if I had seen them 2 years later, they're still dealing with inflammatory diseases because they didn't change their lifestyle. You know, and I didn't know at the time, and we were learning about these probiotics and what do I take for this? Oh, the studies show that this seems to really help. Well, it does, but you have to. So if you recognize it's how we've lived our life that produces the results we've currently got, when you're diagnosed with leaky gut, it means there has to be a shift in lifestyle. Or you can take all of the great supplements, you can calm everything down for a couple of months, and then you're right back to where you were. So in answer to your question, if you're doing the lifestyle modification, if you're looking to see what foods your immune system says are a problem, if you're looking at the amount of stress and you're doing some things, maybe going for a walk every day, or you're actively involved in calming down this inflammatory state that you've got, 3 to 6 months before we'd recommend you retest. It's going to take at least that amount of time because, you know, the tube starts at the mouth and goes to the other end. And when you have a leaky gut, that means part of the tube, the inside lining, is torn a little bit. So stuff gets in that is too big. So it's getting into the bloodstream. So this tube is where all of the good bacteria and the bad bacteria live. So you have to change the environment of the tube, which means you have to rebuild the microbiome, a healthier microbiome, a diverse, healthy microbiome. And that takes months to do, months. You can have a noticeable impact in a few days, but just wrap your head around this. My mentor, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, who founded functional medicine, brilliant, brilliant man, never exaggerates, ever. He said, Tom, a teaspoon of poop has more bacteria than all the stars in the known universe. So wait a minute. I've got 20 feet of intestines, and just a teaspoon of poop has more bacteria. So how much bacteria is in my gut? There's 10 times more cells of bacteria in your gut than all the human cells in your body. 10 times more than the bone, brain, muscle, skin, organ, cells, add them all up. There's 10 times more bacteria in your gut. And that environment in there creates the inflammatory environment, or it creates more of the anti-inflammatory environment, or it's a neutral, sometimes inflammatory, sometimes not, depending on what you eat. You have to change that environment in the gut. And that's only done by persistent, conscious choices of what's on the end of your fork over months and months and months. So if you think you're going to heal leaky gut by taking colostrum or taking glutamine or taking other supplements, you're going to help. You're going to calm down the fire for a while. But that whole environment is an inflammatory environment in there that caused the leaky gut in the first place. And that doesn't go away by taking the supplements. The supplements turn up genes of anti-inflammation and turn up genes of let's build healthier, stronger cells. But you can't live on supplements for the rest of your life for a leaky gut. I mean, you can if you want to, but it's not going to work. So it takes months and months and months of consciously being aware that you want to put in more anti-inflammatory gene stimulators from the end of your fork than inflammatory gene stimulators. That's the big picture. That's the big kahuna goal. So I would never recommend rechecking for intestinal permeability before 6 months. I wouldn't do it at 3. at 6 months. For wheat Zoomer, maybe at 3 months for the antibodies to wheat, maybe. If
Well, wheat has a half-life of 3 to 4 months. So I think
Right.
6 months is
6 months is safer.
Mhm.
It's a lot safer. Yeah.
Give your body a chance to heal. But when you think about, let's say somebody's abused their body for 40 years, not purposely. They don't wake up every morning and say, I'm going to abuse my body, but
Right.
just unconsciously and not having the knowledge that you have now. And then let's say that it heals in 6 months. I mean, that's amazing. The human body has the most amazing ability to heal. And it's just so exciting. I mean, the consult right before this, I talked to her she started this 3 months ago and she's doing so much better. And it's just so rewarding and so exciting to see people heal and turn all of this around.
Yes.
Gas and bloating. And I just saw celiac disease markers fourfold out of range brought completely into range. And that's just so exciting to see. So I think we all need to if you need to put a sign up in your house that says, my body has an amazing capacity to heal, right? To just know that. And so there's things that we need to do to expedite healing, but this is a journey, right? This isn't a destination. We don't get to heal for 3 months and then go back to what we were doing before, because that's going to get us right back in the situation we originated in. So we get to constantly aim for 30 to 50 different plant-based foods and all the different colors of the rainbow with root vegetables and leafy greens and some fermented foods and balancing our blood sugar. These are things that we get to do to live this vibrant, healthy, amazing life that we have been gifted and that we are lucky to have.
Think of the woman that I started off talking about. 25 medications, 17 years of chemotherapy, 25 years of prednisone in 4 months off of everything. And not because her goal was to be off medication, but she just felt so much better that she was willing to do that and work with her doctors. So I always say, high blood pressure medication, you go back to the doctor that gave it to you and you say, look, I've changed my diet. I'm exercising a little bit. I feel really great. Can you just monitor me and wean me off of this medication so that I'm safe? But if I don't need it, I don't want to take it. And that's what you do with the meds that you've been prescribed, is you work with the doctor that gave them to you. Now, this particular rheumatologist that she had that just laughed at her and said, you'll be back. That's the rheumatologist that recommended 17 years of chemotherapy and 25 years of prednisone. So it might be time to find a new rheumatologist in that situation if she needs one.
Right. Okay, next up, another question from Instagram. If on the test for food sensitivity, it shows no gluten sensitivity and you have leaky gut, do you still avoid gluten?
Really good question. There's a whole discussion that we need to have on testing and the accuracy of testing. And in the scientific world, it's called the sensitivity and specificity. And I started to get an inkling that there was a problem back in the 1990s. Because my rule has always been test, don't guess, test. And so what I started doing, and I did this with 4 or 5 patients for each of the labs that I use, I drew their blood and I took a second tube of blood in the same blood draw and I put a different name on it. And I ordered the same test from the laboratory for the patient, but then the second tube with the phony name, I ordered the same test. And I wanted to see how close were the results. And so often they came back diametrically different, completely different, different people. No, it was the same person. But that showed me that the accuracy of the tests that most of our doctors are using is not really great. And it was really a problem for me because I didn't know what to do. And it was January of 2016 that Michelle called me and said, listen to this. And she had just seen a study of a new laboratory that had opened, and that's where these Zoomer tests are, that had 97 to 99% sensitivity and 98 to 100% specificity. And this paper came from Mayo Clinic, and one of the real heroes in celiac research at Mayo Clinic, his name's Dr. Joe Murray. And he had written that paper along with his team, and he called it a new era in laboratory medicine. So we are just tickled. For the last 6 years now, we've been using the Zoomer tests because they're right on the money. And I've sent double samples to this lab also for Zoomers, and they come back on the money. Slight variation, but it's within statistical, the 2 to 3% difference. It's okay, but right on the money every time. So I would suggest that the tests that you're using may not be as comprehensive as your doctor would like to believe they are. And your doctor doesn't know, because doctors don't do this. They don't send off a second sample to the lab because I have to pay for it myself when I do that, right? And doctors don't want to do that. And they believe in their test. Look, it's a sheet of paper. See, it says right here, you don't have a problem with wheat, see? Well, do the wheat Zoomer and try that again and see what you find out. So that's the first part of my answer to your question. The second part is every human gets transient intestinal permeability when wheat goes into the small intestine. It happens within 5 minutes. We've seen the videos on this. It's really cool to see the videos. It happens within 5 minutes. Every human, whether they have a symptom or not. So if you've been diagnosed with the leaky gut, absolutely, you want to be gluten-free. Absolutely.
And you want to do a test. This is from Fasano's paper, that's zooming in at the peptide level, right? So this is where Dr. Fasano said there's certain peptides in gluten that don't digest in the human body. Most food sensitivity tests are testing a sensitivity to the entire protein structure, all of these amino acids connected together. If that entire protein structure is leaking out of the gut, we've got an even bigger problem. Yeah. We're not chewing our food well enough, right? That's some significant intestinal permeability. So when we're zooming in at this peptide level, we're just getting so much more accurate information, but these peptides don't digest in the human body. So they sit in the stomach for the 90 minutes, food's typically in the stomach, and then they pass through to the small intestines where they cause inflammation, permeability, then they leak out into the bloodstream, and the body does exactly what it's supposed to do. It says, foreign invader, I have to attack. We wish it was a sniper rifle. It's not. It's a semi-automatic rifle going after anything that looks like this, PPYCT, go on to R. Well, every tissue and organ in our body is made of amino acids. So if our blood-brain barrier has that same amino acid sequence, or our joints, or a thyroid, the fancy word is molecular mimicry, right, Dr. Tom? But it's really just the premise behind how gluten triggers autoimmune disease. Right. And if you have genetics associated with one of the 100 plus autoimmune diseases, then gluten could likely be the trigger for you. It's not worth it. It really doesn't taste that good. I'm sure people would argue with me on that, but once you get it out of the diet, you don't miss it because you feel so great. Okay, next question.
Actually, after you've crashed a few times because you went back and you ate a croissant. Oh, I really miss croissants. I'm feeling like I can have one. And then you crash that day, or you crash the next day. I love when patients come, oh, doc, I felt so terrible for 3 days. I had diarrhea. I felt terrible. I said, oh, that's great. Congratulations. Now you know, and now the long-term effects, let me explain the long-term effects of what just happened to you. And as Michelle said, the lifespan is 3-4 months from a single exposure where you're going to have more inflammation in your body. And so some people have to fall on their face a couple of times before they get it. So
Yeah, some people need to do a neural zoomer plus.
yes,
Right? We all have our
yes.
different. For some people, the pain of giving up the food is difficult. Some people, the pain of dealing with the symptoms, right? And some people are concerned that they don't want to head down the path of neurological decline because they just
Right.
took care of a loved one, right? So all of us have some reason, something that's driving us. My daughter has been diagnosed with bipolar. What do you recommend about gluten and dairy for her diet?
Absolutely, I would do the wheat zoomer and neural zoomer plus tests. Absolutely, and the gut zoomer, because for every one message from the brain going down telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up telling the brain what to do. The ratio is 9-1. Next fact, 36% of all the molecules in your bloodstream, all the small molecules in your bloodstream, are the exhaust of the bacteria in your gut. You know, when you exercise, if your muscles sore the next day, it's lactic acid. Lactic acid is the exhaust from your muscle cells. Well, the bacteria in your gut have exhaust. It's called the metabolites. 36% of everything in your bloodstream are the metabolites of the bacteria in your gut. If you have too much of bad bacteria in your gut, the messages that get into the bloodstream are messages of inflammation. And the ratio is 9-1. The amount of brain hormones called neurotransmitters that your brain produces that keeps your balance, your equilibrium emotionally, the neurotransmitter balance is completely controlled by your gut and the messengers going up. Because those messengers, they've got their hands on the steering wheel of how your body functions and how your brain produces its hormones, its neurotransmitters. And just turn your steering wheel 5 degrees and then try and drive straight down the road. Within 50 yards, you're off the road. You got depression, or you got anxiety or schizophrenia or bipolar. Absolutely have to check the gut, do the wheat zoomer, neural zoomer plus, and gut zoomer tests, and work with Michelle or another trained practitioner who knows how to interpret these tests so that while you're giving your daughter her medications, I'm assuming they've recommended those, and you want to keep her functioning and safe, while you're doing that, you're also working to change the environment that's creating this mess for her. Michelle, do you want to add to that one?
Yeah, that's perfect. Right. That's exactly what I would recommend. Mm-hmm.
Let's do one more.
Okay. Is there a colostrum for babies who are not being breastfed?
Yeah, the same one that's on our site. It's safe for everyone, any age, any age. Let's do one more.
Okay. Can gluten sensitivity be reversed?
Absolutely. No. The symptoms of gluten sensitivity, the activation of the immune system to protect you can be calmed down. But will you then not be sensitive? No. Every human has this reaction because wheat is misinterpreted as a harmful component of a bug. The protein structure of wheat looks like the outer surface of a bug. So toll-like receptor 4, the sentry, the standing guard, says a bug. And it activates this whole protective mechanism. And this occurs in every human. This is Harvard Medical School writing this in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Can we say it any clearer? I'm looking you in the eye. Harvard Medical School is saying this. It's published in the top journal in the English language, the Journal of the American Medical Association. In my all-day training, I've got 5 different papers on this topic for doctors. So we don't like it. Well, I feel fine when I eat wheat. I don't have a problem when I eat wheat. You know, okay, well, wait till you have a problem and you've gone to 7 doctors or you've been on chemotherapy for 17 years, and then you'll listen, right? Some people, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah. the
Okay.
ulcerative colitis, the Crohn's. Once you've got that raging autoimmune disease,
Yeah.
the body can heal. You can put it in remission, but it's always in the background,
Yeah, there's a
ready to
sensitivity.
flare if there's a stressful event in your life or something going on. So it's a lot better to prevent, if at all possible. And the next time you get your craving for gluten, you go get some wheat berries and you cook those up and you eat that gluey glob of yuck and see if you still crave gluten. Because remember, whole food diet, we're eating whole food. I got a little whiny puppy here that wants to make
Oh.
an Instagram debut.
Oh, how sweet. How sweet.
When do you want to make your Instagram debut?
Oh, look. Oh, how sweet. Well, the time goes too fast. Before we go, I want to say hello to my favorite family in Iowa. Nice to see you guys out there. Thank you so much, as always, for being here. And Michelle, thank you. We'll see you next month.
Tom. Thanks for all the great questions.
You bet. You bet. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you next week.